Alrighty, so I wanted to talk about extroverted sensing, pros and cons. So let's talk about it, man. Extroverted sensing. Let's first talk about the pros. So the pros of extroverted sensing is simple. You're not afraid. Extroverted sensors are very bold. Extroverted sensors are not afraid to try things. They're not afraid to do things. They're not afraid to express themselves in the sense of you can't really stop an extroverted sensor. Their willpower is impeccable. You know what I mean? Another huge pro about extroverted sensing is they have this ability to be one with their environment in a way that other types can only imagine. As an extroverted sensor, you literally are so present. You're literally with your environment. And because of that, extroverted sensors a lot of the time are one with nature. They can be one with animals. They can be the types to not be afraid to play with different instruments, play with different toys, from things like instruments, like I said, to even things like guns or firearms. Like these things they can intuitively pick up on very fast because they're very good with their five senses. So they're able to be very one with the environment and trust the environment more than, like, let's say, an extroverted intuitive or intuitives in general. Another pro about extroverted sensing is they have a very good keen eye and ability to see what is powerful or to see what is special or peculiar in their environment. So when it comes to art, they are superb because they're able to view colors and nuances of their environment that other people would miss because they're so engaged with the environment. So as a result, when they do create or produce things, their art is so vivid, it's so different, it takes the simple things of life and they can add so much color to it because they're not only looking at it, they're experiencing it at the same time. So it gives them this ability to be connected to their art, connected to their environment in a way that other types could just only imagine, okay? What's another pro? Extroverted sensors have this extreme ability to be present. Now, don't get me wrong, they are very much so involved with the environment, so they can get distracted in that sense. But when they lock in on something or when they connect with something, extroverted sensors do it on a much higher level. They're so present that they're the perfect people to be in quick respondent situations where you need help, because while everyone else is losing their head, they're focused on the task. They're making sure to be in the environment and doing what needs to be done in the environment. So that presentness that extroverted sensors have is amazing, and that also allows them to carry a lot of energy and power into everything that they do because they are so present and they are so engaged with their environment, okay? And then just to keep things moving, my last thing I'll say about extroverted sensors, they're very fun. Extroverted sensors are very fun types. Extroverted sensing dominant. And extroverted sensing as a function itself is a very fun function because compared to introverted sensing, which is all about making sure you're safe within your environment more so, extroverted sensing is all about engaging with your environment, being out there, playing and enjoying your environment and, connecting with your environment. So in that regard, extroverted sensing is superb when it comes to connecting with the world, taking in information hands-on, and accumulating a lot of experience with the world. And it's because of extroverted sensing that we're able to know what's right from wrong on a very basic level. Because extroverted sensing, when it comes to the fire, they're the ones that are going to put their hand in the fire and let you know, oh yeah, that's hot. They're not going to sit there and say, what's that? They're going to say, let me see it for myself. That's the best way I can describe extroverted sensing. Let me experience it. Let me deal with it for myself, and then I'll let you know what I think. And that's very bold, and that's the boldness that's needed for us to continue progressing. Okay, so that's that. Now let's talk about some of the negatives of extroverted sensing, okay? Let's say you do touch the fire. You will get your hand burned. That's the thing. So extroverted sensing, what happens is a lot of the time you can end up in a lot of trouble if you're too engaged with extroverted sensing because you're so focused on being present and engaging with the environment that a lot of the time you're not going to be paying attention to the negatives that might be in your environment. A lot of the time you might not be very wary or thoughtful of the negatives that you're doing or the things that may hurt you. Another thing about extroverted sensing is that because it focuses less on things like extroverted intuition or the intuition, it a lot of the time isn't paying attention to the connections that it's building over time. So a lot of extroverted sensors might do a lot of risky behavior and not be aware of the connections that are building over time to leave them in a bad situation later. So extroverted sensing is very disconnected from intuition in that regard. And as a result, as an extroverted sensing dominant, you can end up in a lot of trouble because you're doing things almost impulsively, and that can cause you to end up with a lot of bad repercussions in the future if you're continuing to only be engaged with the world around you. Another con about extroverted sensing, it's very stimulus heavy. So extroverted sensing is all about the five senses. This can cause people to engage, for example, in eating too much because they like the sensation of good taste, or drinking too much, or doing very risky activities to get that rush. Extroverted sensing a lot of the time is a function that likes to be engaged, and if it's not being engaged, if it's not trying things out, it can become very bored very easily. So as a result, extroverted sensors can find themselves in situations where they're pushing the limits so much, right? They have such an inability to be comfortable with boredom that they can get hurt, they can get in physical accidents, they can get in altercations with people because they're doing too much. They can, a lot of them can go to jail. Like, a lot of them can end up being in a lot of trouble because they've been testing and pushing the limits so much, they have lost touch with the boundaries of life. So that is a con definitely for extroverted sensing. Another con for extroverted sensing is organization and structure. Extroverted sensing dominant a lot of the time is, like I said, about going with the flow, experiencing. So a lot of the time you don't have that ability to plan or to have the energy of planning and taking things one step at a time, because a lot of times that's too boring for extroverted sensing. Extroverted sensing is going out, but a lot of the time they need to practice the art of going in, because by going in and by practicing patience, you have the capacity to build and to plan things and organize things long enough so that when you do go back into the world and apply that extroverted sensing, it's not being wasted energy, it's not frivolous energy. You're actually being able to allow that extroverted sensing to do even more now, because you actually have a structured basis to use when it comes to engaging extroverted sensing. So those are definitely cons that come with extroverted sensing as well. And the last thing I'll say about extroverted sensing as a con is just that lack of intuition a lot of times. Extroverted sensing a lot of the time, it lacks the ability to pay attention to the nuances when it comes to intuitive things. For example, knowing that, okay, let me try to do this differently with the person, right? Or it's like essentially extroverted sensing is so focused and engaged on everything in the present, it lacks the understanding of how multiple things in the present play out, which the best way I can easily describe this is, for example, someone who has extroverted intuition is gonna observe and take in so many different experiences that they can then understand intuitively how to act differently in a situation. But an extroverted sensor, because they're so present, they're just gonna be, essentially they are wherever they are. And that kind of makes them have a lack of being able to change according to their environment. So extroverted sensing is very good at changing in their environment in real time, but when it comes to adapting over time, they have a hard time with that, because instead of focusing on how to adapt over time, they're taking each day one day at a time. You see? So to simply put that, a con of extroverted sensing is that it doesn't have the presence and time to go within to pay attention to how things work over time, because it's so engaged in the present. So I would definitely tell all extroverted sensors, be cognizant of what's around you and pay attention sometimes rather than just taking action. Take some time to observe and see how things are moving around you, because over time you'll be able to notice things that will allow you to intuitively move differently in environments. That way you become less predictable. That way people can't know what you're up to or know, okay, the extroverted sensor is going to just do this because they always do this. Instead, you get to have a little bit more variability, a little bit more spontaneity in how you move and how you do things, because you are more present. But that requires you to be more present and be comfortable in that boredom. You see, extroverted sensors have a hard time with boredom. So embrace the boredom, extroverted sensors. Use that con and turn it to a pro. When you are bored, engage in learning, engage in studying your environment, engage in reading, because these things are going to give you the information you need so that when you do engage with extroverted sensing again, you do it on a much higher level, on a much more powerful level, and I think, by understanding those pros and cons, extroverted sensors will be able to be much more effective, much more powerful, and much more influential in everything that they decide to do. So with that being said, hope you learned a lot. Shout out to extroverted sensors. It's MBTI week. We're just getting started with this MBTI information. I'm just getting the boring stuff out the way. So those are pros and cons for the extroverted sensors. I'll talk to you soon.